Come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all of your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together, we make it a holy place.
And I'd like to invite you in just a moment to rise with me. We're doing a hymn that might be familiar to you or not. You will catch it very quickly, so I'm going to sing the first chorus with you and then invite you to join with me in singing. Rise as you are willing and able. I want to be ready. I want to be ready. I want to be ready when joy comes back to me. I want to be ready. I want to be ready. I want to be ready when joy comes back to me. I've been downtrodden, been downhearted, I've been downhearted. I won't be down for long, 'cause I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready when joy comes back to me. Been through lions, too long crying, too long crying. I won't cry anymore, 'cause I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready when joy comes back to me. Been to the ground, Lord, tied to the ground, Lord, tied to the ground, Lord, lighter every day, 'cause I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready when joy comes back to me. Am I getting low, Lord? Still get low, Lord. I still get low, Lord. I'm gonna rise again, 'cause I wanna get ready. I wanna get ready. I wanna get ready when joy comes back to me. Surrounded by midnight, surrounded by midnight, surrounded by midnight. The sun's gonna warm my face, 'cause I wanna get ready. I wanna get ready. I wanna get ready when joy comes back to me.
So we do a thing where once a month, I think this is a little high, once a month we are introducing a different hymn we're going to do the whole month. That's the hymn of this month. So if you like it, good news for you. If you don't, you're going to get to like it. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I'm so pleased to welcome you today. A few things for you to know. If you're a visitor and you want to know more about joining this church, you can talk to any of the people that you see here. Maybe not the church member. Well, you can talk to Salvador too, but maybe not his kid, unless you know a lot about membership in this church. Yeah, don't talk to his kid. But any of the rest of us, talk to us. Welcome to those of you online. I'm guessing some of you are doing this and double dipping watching the Saints game. I am making no predictions on that because I don't have access to watch it. So not because I'm up here, because they put it on a bad station. So some things for you to know. During middle hour, the online people, this is what I want to tell you. If you're double dipping and the Saints look like they're going to do what the Saints do, come on over here for the 11:30 service. I'm going to jinx everything. All right. What you should know is between the services, we now have enough children attending that we're actually going to offer 2 children's faith formation classes. We also have 2 adult faith formation classes. One of them is what it means to be UU. And the other thing that we've been doing, which is really, I think, very cool, is we're bringing in basically leaders in the community who happen to also be members of this church. And Carrie Patterson is right over there. Online people, picture someone waving and me pointing to them. That is going to be talking. They're both in rooms 6 and 7, which is as far away from the sanctuary that way as you can get. So just walk as far away from here as you can go. I think in the building. Don't leave the building. And this launches Stewardship Month, so we have a special guest from our generosity team to come and talk about what that means.
Good morning. I'm Connie Mcleod, and I've been a member of this church since 1990. I'm also recently retired, and back in May when I retired, I got a phone call from Donna Yelverton, reeling me into her committee. I think the world of Donna, and I immediately said yes. I didn't realize till the first meeting that it was stewardship, now called the generosity team. I thought to myself, asking people for money, one of the things I'm most uncomfortable about, that and public speaking. But I trust myself that the universe is pushing me outside my comfort zone. Over the weeks, I've come to see the pledge differently. I used to see it as just another bill. But the pledge is really different than paying the water bill. It's my promise to this sacred community. It's my commitment to this church that has supported me through good times and bad. I know this church nurtures me and challenges me, and it makes my community a better place. I joined this church with my mother, Jimmy D., when I was expecting my daughter, Jade. My mom and I came from a Southern Baptist background, and we knew that we didn't want this baby to grow up in a faith community that was going to tell her Chinese Buddhist immigrant daddy and his family were all going to hell because of their beliefs. My daughter thrived growing up here. And it was here for us when Nana died. Because I'm now on the generosity team, I'm asking you to pledge your commitment. I'm bumping my pledge up this year, and I hope you will too. I'm here to answer questions and to take your pledge. And we want to know your story too.
So the lesson this morning is a true story. It comes from our Unitarian history. Did you know that there were and are Unitarians in Transylvania? Many, many years ago, in one small village, stonemasons and glaziers and foresters and carpenters and blacksmiths, all of the people of the village worked together to build a Unitarian church. Everyone, young and old, got together and painted the inside and the outside of the sanctuary and the building with designs around the windows and different designs around the doors. And after everyone had gone home for supper, a little girl named Zora and her father explored the beautiful new church. Zora's footsteps tap, 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 tapped through the stone building. She twirled around, and suddenly she stopped. "Papa, we have not finished. There are no lamps. The church will be dark when the people come back." "Ah, no," said her father. "The light of the church comes from its people. You will see." He rang the bell in the big stone tower to call the people to worship, and then he and his daughter went outside to wait. Night was falling. Tiny points of light came from many directions, moved steadily up the hill, a moving stream growing brighter and larger all the time. Each family brings its own oil lamp and lights its way here, Zora's father explained, as he lifted Zora up to hang their family's lamp in one of the iron hooks inside the sanctuary. Soon the church glowed with the light from all of the family's lights. Zora watched those lamps all the way through the service. She watched her family's lamp the most. And then she helped carry their lamp home. Its bright flame lit the path down the hillside. And at bedtime she asked, "Father, you said the light of the church comes from the people, but the people take the light from the church." "Yes," said her father, "and we bring it back again, even when we are not in church. Even when the lamp is not physically lit, we carry the light of truth in our minds and the flame of love in our hearts to show us the right way to be. And that light, the light of truth and of love, will never go out."
One of the things that I neglected to say earlier is that we have childcare available for 5 and under, faith formation between the services, but if anyone, this worship is for everybody, but if anyone needs a little bit of a break as a parent, we have that available. We have cards also for you to sign. This Sunday we're going to send a card to Nancy Cunin, who's recovering after a broken wrist. So this ritual we have is for everybody in this church, visitor and member alike. We invite those who wish to line up either along the west or the east wall. Come forward, take a stone. It's your work to figure out what it represents. Maybe it's a hope, maybe it's a dream, maybe it's someone you're carrying. Place it in the chalice bowl. We now invite those who wish to come forward as we place stones. And we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
Through every land
is a lot of forming going on, it seems, in nearly every part of the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. The launch of 2 new ministers, a total reshaping of the lifespan faith development programs, changes in worship, not the least of which is multi-platform, a new generosity team, etc. This is different than a restart after the worst effects of the pandemic, where people could just plug back in. Every area is being shaped into in a new way, which may be seizing an opportunity. Yet, in a time when everyone is stressed and seeking stability and solace, forming ministries anew is not only a further drain on resources, it makes some people no longer feel at home in the congregation. Choices must be made strategically so that the church does not further distress its members and lose people.
So that opening reading is an excerpt from, we had a stewardship, this is a little hot, Mike, you could go down a little, I think. We had a stewardship consultant come in August, his name is Mark Ewert, to look at the church and find out sort of what our capacity, not just for giving financially, but basically what's the state of the church. And he heard a lot, and he wrote a big old report, and today I thought we would actually let you hear different highlights of that report. So you're going to hear 4 readings throughout the service on that. So what we are theming this month, so if you remember right back when Reverend Chris started, we don't need the next steps report anymore, Mike. I mean, you can all look at Mark, he's great, but so we thought that this is our next chapter in the church's life, right? And we decided that that was August, where we would identify what it is. In September, we spent all of our time talking about where we were, where we come from, what this new world we live in looks like. We were creating the setting, the background, the staging of characters, getting you ready for this month, where we're actually going to write what the next chapter of this church looks like. You should also know that this service is the launch of our stewardship drive, which Connie already mentioned, which we are calling Funding Our Next Chapter, just to all stay within theme here. This service and the launching of the stewardship drive are intimately connected and not at all connected at the exact same time. What I mean by that is today's service is not an ask for money. It is a genuine theological discussion of what it means to write our next chapter as a religious people. It's about how to be strategic amongst all of this new and forming that Mark talked about from the reading earlier. So here's how this service is going to work. Section 1 is this one, which is the introduction to the concept. Each section is going to be introduced by a reading that Reverend Chris is going to do from Mark's report. Section 2 is the logistics of writing our next chapter. Section 3 is all of the sad stuff, where I'm also going to probably mention Hurricane Ian. And Section 4 I'm calling the miracle. Also, right in the middle of that, we have a testimonial from a member of the church who you'll find out more about where he is when he comes and delivers it. So, the reason we have focused so much on this idea of next chapter, it's because we're not turning our backs on everything that has happened. The next chapter in a book usually has the same, but not all of the same characters. And in fact, as I was walking up, Kathy noticed and pointed out to me, a good number of people in the sanctuary were not here in the before times, which becomes more and more a reality every Sunday, all the way up to like 20 years from now. But it's true that we have new characters in this chapter. But it doesn't obliterate what happened before. It just builds on the previous chapter. It builds on the story. It adds new twists and development. Just like this church, our next chapter in our own personal lives is built on our past. It is built on the members of this church who are here but are no longer. It is built on the members of this church who are currently here, and we are writing this chapter to think about all the people who have yet to come into the story. Similarly, in your life, everything that came before is not gone. The good, the bad, the boring, the traumatizing, the joyful, all of these have made you who you are for good and bad and complicated. We don't have to let the past write this chapter, but it still informs it. We do not need to be constrained by our previous chapters. Starting today, we can write what happens next. So to be able to write that next chapter, I'll tell you about in a little while.
Each month, we, the members and friends of the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge and our social justice chairs, the team of our social justice team, dedicate a portion of our offering to a local community organization which is embodying some of our principles, maybe not perfectly, but that are aiming to extend our values as a congregation outside the walls of the congregation. This month, we are dedicating half of the month's offering to the Walls Project. Who here is familiar with the Walls Project? A few hands have gone up here in the congregation. It leads programs, events, and alliances that work to break through and tear down the societal walls that discourage or prevent people from living safe, healthy, and prosperous lives. It has a bold vision for what is possible in this community, creating pathways for economic prosperity, lifelong learning, creative expression, and healthy living for all. So when we're giving in our offering today, please give generously. Half of it goes to the Walls Project, and we will now humbly and gratefully receive today's offering. Importantly, with only 4% of the pledges, fulfilling 1/4 of the entire budget, if even one of those pledgers move away, has financial challenge, or otherwise reduces their pledge, the entire congregational budget is adversely affected. At the low end of the range, 67% of the pledging households fulfills 1/4 of the entire budget. As seen above, as seen above? No. Not the next one. Yes. As seen above, the distribution is more out of balance than in most Unitarian Universalist congregations. When I last created a chart like this one in 2010, your ranges were more like the national average distribution pictured in the light gray. There may be people in the congregation from this lowest pledge category who have minimal resources or financial challenges, so that they are giving generously, again, they are giving generously, even with a small amount pledge. However, with the percentage that high, 67%, one must assume that at least some congregants in the lowest quartile do not fully understand or embrace their roles as congregation stewards. They might also need more information and an invitation to join in building of the financially diverse and vibrant community, where everyone must contribute generously from their resources within their economic circumstances. Although your finances were well managed and got you all of the way through the worst parts of the pandemic, some of the strategies were not replicable. PPP loans, Great Expectation funds, and some are probably not sustainable, that is, having the minister calling individual households to ask them to significantly increase their pledges, for example.
Let me start with the part of the sermon, part 2, I don't want to start with. And visitors, I am so glad you don't know what I'm talking about. No one on this staff is ever going to ask you for gift cards. Ever. Can I see a show of hands who got that blasted text this week asking you to give money to an Afghan refugee claiming to be me? All right, so you're in good company. Just so you all know, someone, I don't know who, if it's a group of people or some industry or whatever, got their hands on a PDF of our, I'm guessing a PDF of our directory, probably one that's living somewhere in the archives out in the internet somewhere, and periodically we'll create fake email addresses or now fake phone numbers claiming to be me. You're next. So once again, just to clarify, we get our funding through the pledge drive. And he did it the day the pledge cards came out. So I was getting texts from people like, I'm going to give you money now. I'm like, no, wait, maybe, but no. And I do want to say, I love being in a church. So every time he's done, he, she, they, whoever, every time this thing has happened, some members of the church have given. And I want to be in a church where people trust their ministers and their leaders enough to give when is being asked of. And it makes me so angry that someone has found a way to take advantage of that. So I just want to name it, that we will never ask you for gift cards. You can Google gift card scam and report it every time you get it to the FTC. We are doing everything we can to secure the website, but I think it's something that happened in the past and there's nothing we can do. I mean, there's not nothing, but just know that. There we go. Wasted a minute of the sermon on a thing I didn't want to waste on, but I don't want this guy getting any more of our, this person getting any more of our money. All right, so this is a section that gets a lot of Unitarian Universalists into trouble. To write your next chapter, you must do a few things. First, you must go to the store and buy the technology to write the chapter. Maybe it's a pen and paper, maybe it's a typewriter, maybe it's a computer, but you actually have to actually invest in it to be able to do it. And then you have to actually do the hard, strange, and complicated work of putting your story down on paper. As someone who writes a sermon almost weekly for a profession, there's a very different dynamic of what goes on in the mess up here and what I actually put on paper and deliver. Because our theology is so abstract, combined with the fact that the experience in this church, or many UU churches, can be so transformative. We have this, in a way that you can't quantify, we have this very weird thing that happens where we have an inability to articulate particular beliefs, combined with a profound experience many people have in this church, which means it is very hard to explain to people in your real life what you experience when you come here. In other words, because caring that much about this religion, combined with the absence of concrete theological answers, makes us vulnerable, often we go out of our way to avoid investing in the church, in writing our next chapter, trusting enough to put information down on paper. All of this is to say, a successful stewardship drive is not about convincing people to pay for a church. It is not transactional. A successful stewardship drive is convincing people to trust in the religious institution that they have decided to put their membership in, and to trust in it enough to make a promise of what you are going to be able to give to make it exist. So I promised a logistical piece. We want to have this pledge drive done by October 23rd. One of the ways we're going to do it is someone donated 2 tickets to go see Marcia Ball that we will raffle off to everyone who has their pledge cards in by the 23rd. Every year, for as long as I've been here, the pledge drive goes into January, which is not fair to everyone who pledged early. So turn them in as soon as you've done your discernment. What I would like to focus on, if you could put up that report again, I want to focus on this chart. There we are. Online people, well, there it is in the teeny tiny. So if you look, all the way, the darkest gray is our current distribution of pledges. The medium gray is the average UU congregation, and medium gray, the lightest gray. The one all the way on the right is the goal. So what Mark says in his research is if you had everyone give, what they mean is if you took the budget, let's say it's $1 million for ease of math, it's not, but the first $250,000 should be paid for by 40% of the congregation. The next $250,000 should be paid for by 35% of the congregation. The next $250,000 is 15%, and 10% of the congregation should pay for the last $250,000. Our budget is $680 something, so it's a little different, but that math is not good for my brain. Does that chart kind of make sense? Our goal is to fill that chart according to the distribution. So for those who are, and the way this breaks out is number chunks that are not easily replicatable. So if you could show the next slide. The angle's weird because I couldn't get it all on there. I'm sorry about this. I did all of this with Legos, and I asked our poor congregational administrator to keep it up. Instead of having the 4 chunks, I basically divided out each of those numbers. Online people, I'm looking at the wall, so I guess I could point there too. But what we want is that many people in each of those distributions, and that image is not this one, but there's little white bars at the bottom. As people turn in pledges, we're going to go up so you can actually see what our current progress is. So our goal for this year is if you were in the $0 to $500 range, could you get to the $5 to $1,000? Or if you're in the $2 to $3,000, could you get to the $3 to $5? Do you see what I mean? Currently we have 8 people over 10,000. According to Mark, we need 23 over 10,000. You can play with that all you want. You can take it down now. Are y'all good? I told you this is the logistics section. Are y'all okay? Visitors, turn off your brain. This is great 2 years from now stuff. You're good? All right, I'm going to go even deeper. I actually really enjoy this, which is weird. So last year, this church gave the most money it has ever pledged. The members pledged $553,000, which it came from 226 families. And I don't mean people with children, I mean like families, each pledging unit. Quite a few people increased their pledges significantly. And last year's stewardship drive, I was not sure we were going to be able to even fund the church as it was. We had to make all kinds of cuts. I wasn't sure we were going to even be able to keep all of the staff because we lost $75,000 in one-time money. That was referenced in the earlier part of the report. This year, for us to make budget, we have to take that 553 and bring it up to 600, and that is not make budget do all the exciting stuff. That's just do the logistical things, like keep staff, keep the electricity on, things like that. Because we lost the PPP loan, we lost some one-time funding from a capital drive we did a decade ago. Basically, and the other thing is people say, great, we'll get new members to pay for that. It takes about 5 new members to replace 1 veteran member. Because as you join a church and you give a little bit because you're scared to give to an institution, and each year as you give, you go, oh, that wasn't as scary. Or maybe the church actually was respectful with my money, and the giving increases. So in other words, we are not necessarily expecting new members to cover that $50,000 gap. It needs to come, the only way we're going to balance the budget is to come from current church members. The good news, that graph that I'm not going to ask to go back up there, if we had the natural distribution of people within that, this church, in other words, if 40% of the people gave in that first quarter, 35% in the second quarter, 15 and then 10 or whatever the math is, this church would have a $1.1 million budget. So it is not that we have to draw weird new money out from places that don't exist. If everyone fell into that natural distribution, we'd have so much money we wouldn't know what to do with. We are about to do some amazing things. So I was watching, I have about 4 churches that I watch, pardon the pun, religiously, because thank you. It was not good, and I actually do not appreciate encouraging that kind of terrible puns, but it is what it is. Anyway, so I have these 4 churches that I watch all the time, both because it helps me with my sermons, and I think they're doing the work that I want to copy. One of them is looking for a minister, so they're in transition, which we have been in for like 5 years. And this is like going to be the most sought after minister job in the country when it comes open. So I listened to the sermon last Sunday and it was phenomenal. And then after the sermon, the chair of the search committee got up and said, "We're putting off the search for an entire year because we don't have enough money." And this is a big deal church because they don't have enough money. They're putting it off for an entire year. That is not our situation at all. And it is because last year, while we were shut down, you made it so that was not our situation. Please take a minute to think about how absurd it was that we made budget last year, and especially the year before that. Pledging is a promise. It requires each of you to look into the next year and not only know what your finances will be, but also to promise what your health and make a prediction of what the world will be, enough to be able to commit to a church. And last year, with no promise about when this church would stay open, or what your ministry staff would look like, or what the trajectory of the church would be, or what your own health or your own income could be, you gave more than this congregation has ever given, with less members because we weren't growing during transition. I am so excited about this stewardship year because I'm not going to ask you to give without knowing where this church is going. I'm asking to give because we know where this church is going, and it is exciting. Part 2 is over. Let's sing. I invite you to rise and body your spirit.
With Good morning. My name is Mike Patton. Most of you know me. I've been a member here since the mid-1980s. I run the treehouse team, we call it. That's the converted coat closet where the audiovisual system is. And I'm intimately involved with pretty much all things technical here at the church. The internet, the phones, the AV stuff, even the light bulbs. In fact, we're almost done with a major upgrade project where we've replaced every single light bulb and fixture in the church with a modern LED with consistent color temperature, pleasing to the eye, and many of them under the control of the computer. And thank you. It's been my honor and my pleasure. You could just call me Lucifer, whose name means the bringer of light. Hopefully my fall will not be as notorious if and when it occurs. In addition to the hours I spent poking around and crawling through odd corners of our church, I think I've been through every crawl space in here. I contribute about $200 a month, drawn automatically, because I'm a forgetful old coot, from my bank account. I adhere to the recommendation to give 5. I give to charity, the ones that are important to me, about 5% of my income. I give to 2 food banks, the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and WRKF, where I was the original engineer. But my main contribution, my biggest contribution every month is to this church. I'm not as broke as I used to be. That helps. But even when I could only contribute a few bucks each week or each month, I was never unaware that this facility, this organization, is not an air plant. It requires the money and the time of its parishioners to support it. I've been a member here for a long time, but over the years my participation level has waxed and waned. My now ex-wife, Carolyn, Lynn, and I started coming here when our kids were small because we wanted them to be taught the important aspects, ethical and moral, embodied in the best of the world's religious traditions, while not having Christian dogma shoved down their throats as we had both suffered through growing up. We were active members, and I even served on the board a few times back in the 80s. The kids loved the wide-ranging topics taught in Sunday school. In fact, I just talked to one of my daughters yesterday who remembered fondly her time here. And I love the open inquiry encouraged, both in adults and in children, in the RE classes. And then later, sadly, after the kids were grown and my wife and I divorced, my participation level dropped quite a bit, and I actually was not a very active member for several years. But a few years ago, about the time of the sanctuary upgrades, I decided it was time for me to ramp up my participation, both my time contribution and my monetary one. I took an active role in the design and the implementation of the fancy new sound and video system for the sanctuary, as I had for the original much more modest system installed when the sanctuary was built. I literally laid the conduits in the floor and in the ceiling for the original sound system in this room. That was a lot of work, and I was a much younger man. But the timing of the installation of the new AV system and my involvement in it were very fortuitous, because when the pandemic hit, we had the tech infrastructure and I had the know-how to produce a quality virtual service. I'm always hesitant to blow my own horn too loudly, but Nathan encouraged me to speak on this, as my role, being behind the camera, in this case literally, and that's my day job, I'm a radio engineer, so I guess I'm behind the microphone, was invisible to everyone but the staffers who saw me looking like a one-armed paper hanger in the sound booth every Sunday morning and every Saturday for rehearsal. And I'm not a morning person. To drag my butt up here at 8:30 every Sunday morning just kills me. And no one at all saw the many hours I put in, often here until after midnight, furiously brainstorming ways to make this happen and running wires here and there and fighting with computers and software and recalcitrant equipment. Just this week, I've been here till almost 11 o'clock 3 nights installing a piece of equipment that we had to have repaired and making some upgrades to the software and the hardware that runs the system. In fact, it's a little bit strange because this is the first time ever that we're able to have different video feeding the confidence monitor in the back of the room, which the staff can see, and the monitors here. So it's taking a little bit of getting used to, plus the reinstalled video switcher. Nathan also pointed out something that I hadn't even thought of in these terms, and it really kind of hit me when he did. Of all of us involved in the production of the services over that 2-year period where it was virtual only, Nathan, myself, Kathy, Lee, all of us were subject to a certain amount of exposure to risk from the virus, simply being around each other, especially pre-vaccination. Of that cohort, I was the only one who was not a paid member of the staff. I hadn't even thought of that in those terms. I really didn't. But I took that risk because the survival of this church community and of Unitarian Universalism in general is extremely important to me. I want to fight against the sadly rising tide of those who would use religion as a tool of oppression and hatred. While I am an atheist myself, I believe that life is more than just chemical reactions, and that as human beings, our unique combination of self-awareness and individuality, coupled with free will, calls us all to support each other, to go through the world with the certain knowledge that we are all in this together, and that no one is going to come save us except we ourselves, individually and collectively. My heart is broken when I see what is all too often done in the name of religion, both here and abroad. And I want to light a candle. Hell, I want to light a beacon against the darkness of hatred, fear, and superstition. My support of this church and the UUA is my way of furthering that goal. And as I tell my few conservative Christian friends, I welcome anyone who will walk beside me to make the real lives of actual people in this life, the only one we know we have, better. I call on each of you who also enjoy the fellowship and the support provided by this wonderful and unique religious community to join me in giving generously to support it, and to do so with some type of automatic deduction basis so both you and the church can plan financially with confidence. Thank you for your time. I shall now ascend into my rightful place above your own personal Lucifer.
Thank you, and we will watch you ascend into your rightful place. Stewardship connects to other parts of congregational life, and in fact, to our core mission and values in vital ways. If understood in this way, then there are 3 top purposes of stewardship, in no order as they dynamically relate to one another. 1, the individual spiritual life of your members through practicing the just use of money, including charitable uses. 2, building a beloved community of economic diversity which creates right relationship in regards to congregational fellowship and resources. 3, fulfilling your mission and purpose. With these goals in mind, education and discernment are required for individual members of all ages, for the congregation as a community and as an organization. These purposes can help to build an understanding of building beloved community by welcoming economic diversity instead of everyone assuming similar financial circumstances in all congregational households. That is already not true and will inhibit your growth in diversity. This does require the organization to develop the financial wherewithal to support lower income members without overtaxing members who have greater resources. It is important to remember that in many cases, this church is where its members will be remembered as their most full selves, not just a family role. And this is a place where many people will want to be lovingly memorialized and richly remembered. This is an essential phase of the membership journey.
All right, part 3, the hurricane part. For those of you who've been through a hurricane before, do you know that strange feeling of relief and missing out when a hurricane goes elsewhere? And yes, some yeses. It's the most indescribably strange feeling. On Wednesday, without actually consciously thinking about my plans, I went ahead and did a lot of self-care just to make sure I'd be okay, just because I need to do that. All of us need to do that, but that was the day I needed to do it. And I didn't realize I was probably doing it because the hurricane was coming, even though it went to Florida. Seeing images of that hurricane brought up, I've got like a whole list now of hurricanes past, images that I keep bringing up. Also, completely, or maybe not completely coincidentally, I listened to a podcast about the state of climate change, and the question came up about when would cities become unlivable? The reporter they were interviewing said he doesn't necessarily think there will be a time when a city you just snap your fingers and it's uninhabitable. He said it will be a series of quality of life decisions for those who have the means to get out. We have already seen that here. And Baton Rouge is supposed to be what they call a receiver city, one of the cities that can receive people as harder and harder hit communities need to go elsewhere. And yet, a third of this church, I believe, has flooded in one of the 3 floods in the last 6 years. A third. This is not including the trauma of Gustav or Katrina or even Ida from last year. And yet, this church is still here. It's still thriving. This church has roots deep enough in the community that as the climate here gets more traumatizing, because I cannot think of a better way to describe it, this church will be here so no matter what Baton Rouge throws at people, this church can be a grounding spot for those who need it. Just as it was for Hurricane Katrina, when this was the point of where aid came in and help went out before New Orleans had access to electricity. Just as it was in the floods, when the kitchen was full of bleach and gloves and boxes for people to use. This church has been and will continue to be a place of refuge. So for those of you who had a bad week this week, who are maybe re-traumatized by some of the images, just take a breath. Right where you're seated, let's sing this hymn, and we'll do a prayer in the middle of it.
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Please grace this time with harmony. Fly. Tranquility. with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs in new sounds that become full symphony.
Would you join me in a moment of prayer and reflection? The God that we know when we see love and hope and joy and kindness and family, that great mystery named and unnamed, believed in and not, whatever that is that holds us together. Hold this congregation, hold this city, hold this world, hold everybody who is traumatized by whatever on earth is going on. Everyone who is missing someone they love, everyone who is yearning for a world that is more just, everyone who just needs a break. Help us to be beacons of hope and of love. Help us to know that we are worthy to make this world a better place. Amen.
Light shining, illuminate our inward view. Help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs in new sounds that become full symphony.
Stewardship is broader and more profound than just the pledge drive. It has to do with living out our values with our faith and with stepping into beloved community to care for our congregation and the Unitarian Universalist Association. In a Unitarian Universalist context, very much like our faith, we work on a discernment model. We ask people to decide for themselves the correct amount to give, to be in right relationship based on their own finances, connections to the congregation, and investment in its mission and purposes. This creates an openness that allows for an economically diverse community, yet also requires us to provide a good orientation and a suite of tools for their discernment process and practice. Our task is to help our congregants understand and challenge themselves to use their financial resources as a way of doing good deeds in the world.
Can we talk about a miracle for a second? Let us pause for a second and think about how much of a miracle it is that this congregation exists. This is a predominantly white New England religion. It's not entirely white, but it comes out of white New England. That always puts reason, compassion, justice, and love at the center of religious life, and it doesn't just tolerate diversity, but it makes it a religious tenet. Now imagine if, I'm going to ask the locals to just stick with me on this, but for those of you who are transplants here, imagine for a second, actually maybe the locals imagine this in transplants, this is probably your experience. Imagine you're a good Unitarian Universalist in Boston or St. Paul or Duluth or Portland or Albuquerque or wherever, and you find out through whatever circumstances, you have to move to a city that does not have a fairness ordinance that means you can still be fired if you're gay. You go to a city that so dangerously empowers its chemical industry that it is at one end of a corridor that nationally is known as Cancer Alley. You are going to a city where the sins of the nation's separation and racism are so profoundly pronounced that it's almost indescribable. You are going to a city where many of the locals do not even understand why someone would want to move here. Anyone had that experience? Okay. You're going to a city with some of the most traumatizing weather that exists in the country. You're going to a city where the predominant ideology perpetually prioritizes regressive ideas. And this idea that whatever was good enough, and so we should just stick with what was good enough in the past. And then if I told you in that city there would be the largest Unitarian church between Dallas and Atlanta. That's mathematically true. And if I told you that in that city there's a congregation that was founded to be integrated at a time that was dangerous, that it had been doing work for generations for how to build beloved community. We don't get credit for Dialogues on Race. That's an organization that exists here. But it was incubated in this church. Many of its facilitators are members of this church, and many of the members of this church have taken it. I poked some of the leaders to estimate how many people have gone through Dialogues on Race, and they say probably 50,000 people. Imagine 50,000 people in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, being asked to discuss systemically where racism comes from. Not entirely because of, but it may not have happened in the way that it did without the emphases of this church. In a city with one of the highest HIV rates in the country, because people here refuse to acknowledge that sexuality is a part of being human, and that being taught how to be safe with your sexuality is a religious value, and because poverty runs rampant here, and because HIV is still stigmatized as a gay disease, and because the city has not done the work to be welcoming to all of its residents or to give all of its residents access to basic medical care. If I told you there was a church that was offering comprehensive sexuality education to all children, you might say that I was lying, or at least that's a miracle. If I told you that there was a church that helped out with the Bucket Brigade and Louisiana Environmental Action Network, and that told people that we can have a better world without shaming or separating ourselves from the culture, which a lot of you struggle with. I crossed this out and I wrote it back in 3 times, but I'm going to leave it in there. What if I told you that you were going to be moving to a city with religious iconography so large that people will actually call it the 3 crosses over Walmart? Where ministers, not necessarily in that church, but in many of the churches, align themselves by endorsing candidates from the pulpit that makes church an agent of the state. And if I told you in a city that allowed that to happen, there would be a Unitarian church that was at the beginnings of the Interfaith Federation and is still active in it, and a major part of Together Baton Rouge, an organization that is doing good work out in the world, you would probably say that's a miracle. But this is actually not what the miracle is. The miracle happens in the small moments. It's each lamp that you bring and put in a corner in this church. This is not in the sermon, but Friday night we had a dinner for kids, my kids' age and younger. It might have been the first time, for one of my kids at least, but some of the kids had ever been in a dinner with other families because of when they were born as this stupid pandemic plays out. The miracle happens when each of you welcome a visitor, when one of you steps out of your comfort zone, when someone messes up, but then messes up better the next time. It happens when a church member gives like a year of their life, coming every Sunday, when we were shut down and we thought that everything could kill you, so that you could have access to your church. It happens when a volunteer, when we weren't able to sign cards like we used to do, and every week for more than a year, this volunteer just wrote cards to church members who had a birth or a death. It happened when we were meeting outside, and it was like 19 degrees, and the windows blowing so much we had our sermon on a music stand. Do you remember this? And the wind blew the music stand over, and no one was showing up because I wouldn't have shown up. But the board all showed up so there'd be enough people so we could have worship. So you're supposed to, in seminary, I don't know if they told you this, you're supposed to put all your punch into the stewardship sermon. I didn't plan for this to be the punch, but it showed up for whatever reason. Last year, when I had nothing other than a promise that things would get better, when we were shut down for the third time in 12 weeks, and we didn't have a second minister, or maybe even a promise of having a good one, that's an implication you're a good one, and we were losing like $70,000 in one-time money, and members of this church were rightfully angry and irritated and frustrated that they didn't have access to the church in the way that they had always had it. You gave in such high numbers that this is a sustainable church. And this year, finally, after years and years of transition, after all of this exhaustion, we get to say that we are a church on a path towards something great. This church is a beacon for this city. This church is about to do some really cool stuff. And it's not because of me, and it's not because of Reverend Chris or Kathy or Lee or the people in the sound booth or Allison or any of the people that you have asked to be leaders in this church. It's because the roots of this church run deep, and I think they've hit an aquifer. Well, that may be terrible botany, but they hit whatever helps trees grow. It's because individual members often, in small, indescribable ways, have put their faith in this religion. Not their contribution to pay for air conditioning units or for buying new hymnals and not to try to convert other people to try to tell them that they're wrong, but just to know that there needs to be a church here for people who need it. You put your faith in knowing that more people need to know that they're worthy of love, that more people need to know that they are not alone, and that there's a trans kid right now who is trying to come out to their family, and the fact that this church exists makes it more likely that they will be safe when they do it. Right now, there is someone who's trying to give up addiction, and there is an addiction group that meets at this church, not ours. They came to us because they knew that some people would avoid recovery if they were held in churches that mandated the Lord's Prayer be said. Right now, there is some child being told that they are wicked or destined to hell because of how they were born, and this church will be there for them in 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years, and that child may cry when they come here for the first time. This may be the first time that they know that they are loved just by how they were born. Right now, there is a church member suffering from dementia or in the hospital or mourning the death of a child or missing a spouse or disgusted at all the progress we have lost in this world. And because of the faith you have placed in this institution, they are not going through it alone. So when you write your own chapter and you give to write the next chapter in your life, you're not giving to some stagnant thing. You're creating connections that save lives, connections that have saved my life over and over. And it's not about the giving, it's about the trust. It's about the love. It's about a love for this world in a time when cynicism has taken almost everything over. And to say the world is better because we are here. Amen. Let's sing.
Here in reverence now we gather for the blessings we have known, with a pledge to one another shows the path of truth and life. On earth is the earthly Christ. By their work we realize faith calls us on. Faith calls us on. We have shared a radiant hour when the truth has made us free, and the Spirit's gracious power dreamed of good that yet will be. Bright the path before us lies. Joyful pilgrims now we rise. Life calls us on. Life calls us on.
Look to this day, for yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Go in peace, go in love. Amen.